Hello indie game fans, amid the very busy month of June with showcases and the Steam sale, you might have missed these releases and updates, so let's begin with the big catch, Tackle Box, a free demo of a 3D platformer with a fishing theme. And demo is putting it lightly, since this is a completely standalone prologue to the main game that has an average playtime of 7 to 8 hours, which is kind of insane to think about. The platforming in this is great, and the main game could be something special, so for free, why not give this a go? If the Steam sale has hurt your wallet, how about something that is just $1.99 in Elle's Tales Egg, a self-styled survival horror clicker game that sure has a familiar visual style, which is similar to Buckshot Roulette. It's a clicker in which you are attempting to prevent a chicken egg from getting smashed, and is super weird and kind of creepy. This video is brought to you by Kaku Ancient Seal, an open-world action-adventure game with a fantastic cartoony art style that reminds me of animated movies, in which you play as a boy along with his flying pig companion that have to restore balance to the land. The world is split into 4 elemental continents, which you can explore in any order, combining challenging combat with sleek platforming as well as puzzles for a well-rounded experience. You can craft and customize your own unique combat style with abilities and runes, invoking divine powers to defeat your enemies in epic-looking battles. This has been in early access for just over a year and is releasing out of it today, July 12th on Steam, with console versions to come at a later date, and beginning today, we'll have a launch discount of 25% for the next 2 weeks, and with at least 30 hours of gameplay, looks like a fantastic deal, so pick it up via the link in the description below. Developer Sockpop Collective is known for making $5 games of a smaller scope and were, at one point in time, on a monthly release cadence, although that has since slowed down, with their release in June being Clicky Land. This has their signature art style, which is quite common across their games, and it's a village builder tower defense game with clicks as the main resource, but you only get 20 clicks per day, having an interesting strategy component to it. Songs of Silence comes to us from a bigger developer, which is technically independent, although according to Wikipedia, they have 70 people on staff, so it is by no means a small indie team, where they announced the release date of this game after I made my Indie Gaming This Week video, so here it is. This is a turn-based strategy game with auto-battler combat that is in the vein of Heroes of Might and Magic, having turn-based kingdom management and expansion with fun combat in which you place down platoons of units and then hit the go button, and will be for fans of the genre. The developer of Doodle Adventure of Chameleon did reach out, and it seems neat, a puzzle precision platformer with the gimmick of having to switch between different colours to activate blocks, platforms, climbable surfaces, or even spikes. I know there have been a couple of games that have made you switch between 2 different states or colours, and those were challenging enough, so having to switch between 3 seems like a lot, although that may affect how they design the levels as well, but if you love a good precision platformer, this is one to try. There were a number of surprise releases during the summer showcase season, something that I would not recommend, especially if you are a small indie team, since marketing and making people aware of your game is a difficult enough problem in the first place, so to give people no notice of your release simply exacerbates the problem. I guess they were hoping to leverage off content creators, which can work, since Splody is published by Mad Mushroom, a publisher created by the One True King or OTK network of streamers, highlighting the shift in games publishing, with this game being a platformer with no jump button. However, you are propelling yourself through the use of potions in this game, and it looks similar to rocket jumping, so there is still platforming and looks kind of neat. Similarly, another game which released during the Future Games show is Diabotical Rogue, a multiplayer first-person shooter with roguelite-style upgrades which features good action and interesting upgrades. This has drawn some comparisons to Quake in terms of action and game feel, and is from a studio headed up by two Counter-Strike pros, so I'm guessing they know their stuff when it comes to shooters. However, Steam charts shows that its 24-hour peak concurrent players is just 29, down from an all-time high of 276 around launch, which is always the issue with multiplayer-only shooters, and if you're looking for something similar, I would recommend Friends vs Friends instead, since that has a more active player population at the moment. The My Time games are excellent life sim titles, from My Time at Porsche and most recently My Time at Sandrock, where they have expanded the game with the Monster Whisperer paid DLC. This of course adds pets to the game which you can capture Pokemon style, perhaps taking a page out of the book of Palworld being a good addition to a great game. A game which I mentioned in my recap of the best releases of the year so far is the survival crafting action RPG Enshrouded, which follows a long list of such game releases in 2024 which have all been very popular, and they release Melodies of the Mire, the second major update for this game, introducing a new area named the Black Mire, a forest area with a bog and giant trees and monsters, along with new enemies, challenges and more, as well as the usual quality of life and balancing changes to make this even better. I don't watch VTubers, so you have to excuse the gap in my knowledge, but Miko Sniper looks like a neat tower defense game centered around Sakura Miko as she fends off giant animals and slimes using an army of cats, so what's not to love? And of course, looks to be inspired by Plants vs Zombies, so if you wanted more of that style of tower defense game, this is the one to get. I felt a little bad for this developer best known for Dead Cells, since their launch of the Rogue Prince of Persia was completely overshadowed by the surprise release of Hades 2, which kind of ate their lunch, with the difference in quality and quantity of content in the two games being miles apart. But the developers are continuing to chug along and release the Temple of Fire update. This of course adds a new biome and their first meta progression element, along with new weapons, traps and enemies, so they are slowly getting there, although I wouldn't quite recommend jumping in at this moment. If you love roguelite deck builders, a nice looking one is Deathless Tales of Old Russ, one that draws upon Slavic mythology and does have quite a bit in common with Slay the Spire clones. Things have a funny way of cycling around in indie games, and after a wave of Vampire Survivors clones, perhaps things will come back around to Slay the Spire, although hopefully with new spins on the idea. We also have the latest update for Tectonica, a first-person factory building title that is kind of like Factorial but set underground, and has been steadily increasing in popularity while it is in early access, releasing the Laser Games content update. Interestingly, rather than focusing on the core automation and mining systems, Laser Games adds a defense asteroid shooter game in single player and essentially laser tag for multiplayer so that you can have more fun with friends, and has its own map as well as 2 game modes, so if you love this kind of game, what are you waiting for? Developer Coffee Stain North is now under the Embracer Group banner and have quite the successful indie publishing arm, so much so that I wouldn't really consider them to be indie anymore, but they do make great games such as Goat Simulator 3, the sequel to Goat Simulator 1, with the Multiverse of Nonsense paid DLC being of interest here. Of course, in line with the wacky and insane nature of this game, it adds multiverse chaos to the game with a brand new map, new story missions, 8 playable goats, a new dialogue system and more, and is of interest if you enjoyed the base game. Here's a game that you might have swore that you have seen before, but there's a twist on this, since Face Hen sure looks like super Autopads in terms of concept, only adding a lot more emojis in addition to the cute animals. But in addition to the auto-battling mechanics adds a deck building twist. You're attempting to find powerful and broken combos to break the game as much as possible, being theory crafting heaven, and has that Balatro kind of appeal with the massive numbers that you can generate and is worth a look. The developer of Grappler's Relic Rivals did reach out, who used to be a mission designer on games like Dragon Age, Dreadwolf, and Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, but went indie and made this competitive PvP multiplayer party game. There was a time that games like this were all the rage, of Towerfall and Duck Game being the most notable ones, and I believe their popularity still endures to this day. But if you're in the mood for something different, this game might be worth a look. The gimmick, of course, is a grappling hook, which you have to use to get around the level, getting relics and then taking out the opposition, and as a neat pixel art look as well. Another roguelite deck builder which has been chugging along in early access is Combo Card Clashers, one that incorporates auto-battler elements as well, and they released the Combo Raid update. This adds a new Crusader hero, 6 new artifacts, 5 new cards, 1 new event and more, but most interesting of all is the Energy Game mode, which allows you to play multiple cards in one turn. It's interesting that the developer broke it out into a separate game mode and is asking for feedback on which players prefer, so they themselves might not be sure what is the best way to go, but that is the point of early access, so check it out if you're curious. Here's a strange one in the Long Dark Tales from the Far Territory Part 5 Last Horizon, the 5th of 6 parts for the Expansion Pass DLC for this survival game that released in early access way back in 2014, and in the 10 years since then has sold millions and millions of copies and is still going strong. This adds a new region, more story content, a cougar enemy, which seems to have been pulled out due to player feedback, as well as the usual more of everything, and I'm impressed to see that this is still going strong after so many years. A neat pixel art narrative adventure game is Until Then, which has a similar vibe to A Space for the Unbound from last year, only instead of rural Indonesia in the 1990s, this game is instead inspired by the Philippines. It takes place in a world still recovering from a catastrophe where a teenage boy is dealing with the fallout from that while trying to resume normal high school life. But of course, a chance encounter sets off a chain reaction that sees our hero embroiled in a larger world-changing story. Similar to A Space for the Unbound, this is an emotional tale and has touched many lives, so I'm happy to see the success for this Filipino developer. Here's a wacky multiplayer title that might not look like much, but oh dear, seems to have taken off in terms of popularity, going through a relatively short early access period to release in 1.0. This is an asymmetric multiplayer game that pits one hunter against 4 or more other players who are disguised as deer, but things flip when it turns dark and the hunter becomes the hunted, and it looks like it's best with friends, although player population still seems to be holding up as of recording. A fascinating release is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night Classic 2 Dominic's Curse, a paid DLC to the so-called Igavania from 2019, which is one of my favorite games, which is essentially a spiritual successor to the Castlevania series, with this allowing you to play as Dominic, a character from the original game, but it's a classic Vania title instead. That means this is more linear with less Metroidvania elements and backtracking, but this particular release has drawn comparisons to Simon's Quest, and I suppose that is the point since Classic 1 DLC was more like Castlevania 1, so this would be more Castlevania 2, and it's a curiosity worth a look. We also had the surprising return of Dark and Darker to Steam, an excellent PvPvE extraction first-person dungeon crawler that exploded in popularity during one of those Steam Nix festivals, but then got embroiled in legal woes between the developer and Nexon, and then they partnered with Krafton, the PUBG people, to launch it in their own client and is now back on Steam. It is listed as free-to-play but requires a $30 in-app purchase to unlock the full game, and people are more than happy to do so since it is great and has a very strong player count at the moment, so definitely give this a go.
Mission start!
Yes, of course I know that SNK isn't an indie company, but you have to give me some allowance to be a fanboy since I loved the Metal Slug games growing up. And come to think of it, this might have just been the series that made me fall in love with pixel art since it looks awesome. And outside of mobile releases, I think that its last entry was in 2006. So it is good to see it back with Metal Slug Attack Reloaded, which is technically a re-release of a mobile game released in 2016, but with microtransactions removed. This is a tug-of-war strategy game where you summon units and get them to march forward to take out the enemy, having the elements that make Metal Slug, like returning characters, enemies, and even prisoners of war. And it's nice to see games like this still being able to do well since it is rebelling against microtransactions in games. One of the breakout hits of last year was Terra Nil, a so-called reverse city builder that played more like a puzzle game in which you had to terraform the damaged environment to restore nature and attract animals back to the area, and then to erase all trace that you were ever there. And people have been clamoring for updates, and here it is with Vita Nova. This free update adds more content to each region, expanding upon the unique mechanics encountered with 5 new missions in total, a new animal system in which the creatures are naturally attracted back to the revived area. They have partnered with a new developer named Clockwork Acorn, while the rest of the team at Free Lives works on other projects, with there being more content to come for this game, so it should get even better. One of the best parts of indie games is that developers continue to work on and update their game for free, with each additional update bringing even more new players in. See Stardew Valley for example, and such is the case with Wild Frost as well with the Friends and Foes update. This is their biggest update to date, with new characters, charms, challenges and items, as well as a crossover with Balatro, and is even better. Watch this video for the best games of 2023.